All right, so before we start making a grid, I'll just talk about them a little bit. So I took my photo. My photo is my reference image, my reference that I'm going to work from. And so I have that labeled ref. And then this white rectangle here, that's my drawing paper. That's my blank drawing paper. Now we're going to use a grid to enlarge the proportions from the reference and then transfer those proportions to the drawing. The drawing paper that you're going to get is 12 inches by 16 inches. And then a standard computer paper is 8.5 by 10. So we have to keep that in mind because that's the size of the Google document that we'll work on. And if you were to print it out, that's the size that you're going to use. So we want this to be a really easy ratio. You don't want like fractions and decimals because that'll be kind of hard to figure out where you need to make your lines. So it's going to be really easy just to divide it by 2. So 12 divided by 2 is 6. 16 divided by 2 is 8. Now my drawing is twice as big as my reference. And so that's really good because that means that a 1-inch square on my reference will be a 2-inch square on my drawing. So if my eye is a 1/2 inch on the reference, then it's an inch on the drawing. And so you just take all of the information in the drawing, multiply it times 2, and then you transfer that to the drawing, and then that way you'll keep the same proportions. So what this means is we need to get your reference to be 6 by 8. Now it can be 6 by 8 or 8 by 6. It could go the other way too. So I have landscape right now where it's longer this way, but you could do a portrait where it's 8 by 6 and then 16 by 12. Either way works, but it's obviously going to be very helpful if you can get your image to be 6 by 8. So that's what we're going to do for our next step. Okay, now we have our photo. We have to make a grid on top of our reference photo. So I'm going to do this in Google Docs. So I need to open up a new Google Doc, and then I'm going to insert my photo. And I've already saved my photo to my desktop, so I know exactly where it is. I just go to Insert, Image, Upload from Computer. Here we go. There's my cowboy face. Bam. All right. You'll notice the image, my image, is landscape, and the paper is set up portrait. You can do either way. So if you're portrait, awesome, leave it. If yours is sideways like this, I can just change the document setup very easily. Go to Page Setup, Landscape. There we go. Now you'll notice that you can see my rulers. If you can't see your rulers, you just go to View, Show Ruler. All right. Now I need to try to get my image to 6 by 8. So the height, it's shorter. It's a shorter height. So my height needs to be 6 because I don't have a lot of room to spare in my height. I'll zoom in a little bit. I'll pull this to roughly 8. Okay. See where we're at. Doesn't quite look like we're getting to 6. So here's where I can use this add-on tool or this image option tool. That's really cool. Click on the image to make sure that this blue bounding box comes up. See, no blue bounding box, blue bounding box. All right. And then image options will become available when I do that. I click on that. Now this bar opened up on the side here. I go to size and rotation. And here's the size of my image that I'm working with. I'm almost exactly at 8, and then I'm at 5.3. I have a couple options. I could start to crop this and then keep tinkering with it, but I think that it will be easier since I know that this needs to be 6. I'll just set the height to 6. And see, it brings it to the height to 6, and then it enlarges the width to 9. So now I can just crop one side and be done. Right? So now I just need to crop the width down to 8 inches. To crop, I have this tool right here. These little crossing lines there. And then I'll bring in this side because there's some extra space on that side. And I can use the ruler to kind of Take a guess, hit crop, see what we're at. Ooh, we're pretty dang close. I'll just do one more little line. There we go. That's good enough. 8 by 6. Perfect. Now I can put the grid lines on it and then transfer it to a drawing. To put the grid lines on it, this is a little bit tedious. Like I said, we gotta be creative with our current situation. So here's what we gotta do. I'm gonna copy it. So I can copy, I can Command C, either way. Now I go to View, I go to Insert. Now I go to Insert, Drawing, New, Command V. There we go. Okay, before I start making my grid lines, let's just take a closer look at the ruler here because it's a little bit off. See how it pushed it? It pushed it over and down a little bit. So I'm just gonna adjust this. I'm gonna bring it to the 1 and 9 and then make sure I push it all the way to the top. All right, so now I can have really precise grid lines. To make my lines, I click this drop-down menu, line, and I'm just gonna click it right here. And then I grab the base of it and pull it down. Make sure that I extend it beyond the image. And then if I hit shift, it'll make sure that I'm straight. See that? Shift, boom, straight. Okay, there we go. Let go. And then the only other thing would be to turn it red. Now I'm gonna bring these over and I'm gonna make these every inch. Now you could make them every inch, you can make them every half inch. Remember that the drawing is gonna be twice as large. So a 1-inch grid on your reference will be a 2-inch grid on your drawing. If you were to make one of these lines every half an inch, then your grid lines on your drawing would be every inch. So if you were to do that, you would have many more lines to reference, and that will help you be more precise. So it's not a bad idea at all to do them every half inch if that seems like something that you would like. It'll definitely give you more to work from. It'll show you where more lines end and begin, and you'll going every 2 inches on the drawing. You'll have you'll have some more spaces where you don't have much to reference. So just a little bit of advice for the difference between those two. You can do either one. I'm just going to do an inch for this demonstration. Now I click on the line, copy, Command C, paste, Command V, and I'm just going to keep doing that. And I'm going to line these up right in the middle of the numbers. All right, perfect. Now I need to make my horizontal ones. So I'm going to make another copy. I'm gonna pull it down here and then pull it horizontal, and then remember just to hit shift to make sure it's straight. There we go. And make sure it extends beyond the image, and I'm gonna bring it back up and just do it all again. One other thing that you could do if you wanted to label each one of these the columns and rows to give you just a real clear idea of where you're working with, I could select all these, drag them down a little bit, and then place a text box above it here, and I'll just do A, tab, B, and then I'll do the same thing going down here. All right, there we go. Now I will just give you a little bit of an introduction to how to get this started. Okay, so we made our grid on the reference. Now we have to make our grid on the drawing paper. Remember that the whole point of this is to have a grid with the exact same number of squares on the reference as on the drawing, and that way the proportions transfer. So this is where you have to remember to multiply your grid times 2. I made my reference with 1-inch grids, so now I'm making 2-inch grids on my drawing. When you're making the measurements, you'll want to be sure that you're being really precise and going right over that inch mark, that you're not going over the number or just going quick and being a little bit off. You want to be precise. And I'm going on all four sides of the paper and making just very light notches with the pencil. And then once I have all those done, I'll connect them. And that's the reason I want to do it on all four sides, because if you only do it on two, your lines will be crooked or wobbly. This will ensure that they're all perfectly straight. And then as you start connecting them, you want to make sure that you're just setting the pencil on the top of the paper and pulling it very lightly. You don't want to push down into the paper and leave a dark mark, and you definitely don't want to indent the paper. So just rest the pencil on the paper and drag it across the surface, and you'll get a nice light line, and that will be perfect. Here's my nice light grid. And then the final thing to do is label my drawing paper the same way that I labeled my reference image. I use letters for the columns, so I label my columns A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. I use numbers for the rows, so I label my rows 1 through 6. Now this will allow me to look at the squares of my reference and place them in my drawing. For example, my eye is in D3. Now I know exactly where my eye goes on my drawing paper. I know that my lip line sits right on like that fourth line right there in E, in D and E. Well, now I know exactly where to put my lip line in the drawing. That's what the grid is. That's what it does. Now in the next video, I will demonstrate getting started on the drawing and actually kind of progressing through it. That means that that's the end of this video. So, all right, there you go.